Well, I have finished chapters 14 through 22 of A Clash of Kings, and in the previous section that I talked about, Varys said that power resides where men believe it resides. And that gets at a theme that I think is seems to be the main theme of this second book. And that's that truth itself is now at war. This section, chapters 14 through 22, seems to sharpen one of Martin's most chilling ideas that's very much like Charles Williams in a lot of his writings. That power is not truth, it's perception. Tyrion understands something that Cersei does not in these chapters. Tyrion says, when you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. And that's straight out of C.S. Lewis's moral psychology. Because in The Abolition of Man, Lewis warns, when truth is no longer objective, power becomes the only authority left. And that's exactly what we're seeing in King's Landing under the ostensible reign of Joffrey, but really the reign of Cersei, and Tyrion in the middle trying to manage all of this. But in King's Landing, truth is not investigated. It's not defended. Truth is managed. Littlefinger's strategy is to replace truth with a better lie. Not what is real, but what will people believe. In the Screwtape Letters, Lewis shows how evil doesn't always destroy truth. Rather, it corrupts it socially. People begin to believe things not because they're true, but because they're either useful or because they're convenient or because they're safe. That's King's Landing. And the Arya chapters in this book are very interesting. Arya was one of my favorite characters in the first book, but I don't really know where her story is necessarily going. She's sort of on the run in this second book, and it's kind of, I don't really know where her story is going. But in this section, at one point, she walks through a deserted town, and something that struck me, she just wondered, why would people run off and leave their homes and everything? That's just a haunting moment to me, because what she's encountering isn't just war, it's the absence of human meaning, the absence of humanity. It feels like something out of the Lord of the Rings, the abandoned lands, the silence where life should be, the creeping sense that something is wrong in the world. I'm sort of reminded of places like the Dead Marshes or the desolation near Mordor. Arya's fear isn't just danger, but it's, why would people leave everything? Because when fear rules, people abandon their homes, they abandon their identity, and even memory. And then the scene with Chitaya and Tyrion was one that found particularly insightful. I thought of C.S. Lewis immediately when I read it, but at one point, Chataya, or she says, the gods made our bodies, and they give us desire so we might worship them in that way. And at first glance, this sounds almost beautiful. And Lewis would agree to a point. Lewis argues desire itself is not evil. It becomes evil when it's isolated from higher love. And it's almost, not quite, but almost identical to the sensual ghost with the lizard on his shoulder in The Great Divorce. The desire begins small, but it becomes controlling, and it distorts the soul. But it is a real pleasure, and at that, it's closer to redemption than a lot of higher loves. Because the higher love, Lewis's brass is mistaken for gold more easily than clay is. The higher loves are more likely to be made into an idol, while the lower passions, they're real pleasures, and people are less likely to think of themselves as something to worship. And Lewis contrasts it with a mother's love that becomes possessive and devouring. Lewis gives us a crucial distinction. Healthy love is ordered, self-giving, and directed upward. Corrupted love is disordered, self-serving, and curved inward. And in King's Landing, love becomes transaction. Desire becomes power. The body becomes detached from the soul. Cersei, her love for her son Joffrey and her other children, and her love for her corrupted love for Jaime, her brother, like, she's essentially a pattern of the mother in The Great Divorce. While Chataya, she's like the man with the lizard on his shoulder in The Great Divorce. And the man with the lizard, he's the one that ultimately is able to be redeemed. He's closer to the truth and able to be redeemed than what we see of the mother's corrupted love. So Chataya, I see, is much closer to truth than Cersei is, because Cersei's her fault is much more spiritual and therefore much more dangerous. Lewis would say that that love has forgotten what it's for. In Cersei's case, while Chataya, she at least has that understanding. She knows what love's for. And then Bran, in this section, Bran, again, his fly or die vision is just a terrific Lewisian moment. He's blinded, and only then does he see. Lewis writes that God whispers to us in our pleasures, but shouts in our pain. Bran's suffering isn't meaningless. It's awakening. And this also echoes Tolkien's idea that true sight often comes through suffering. You can think of Frodo bearing the ring, and Gandalf passing through death. Bran's body is broken, but his vision is expanding. And Martha's asking, what if weakness is the doorway to true power? And then we get a moment of comparison between Renly and Stannis as far as what is a king, what makes a king. Renly says Robert won the throne with his warhammer. In other words, power is force. But Stannis represents something else. Stannis represents law without love and truth without mercy. In Tolkien, Aragorn has the right to rule, but he doesn't seize it. He waits until the time is right. Renly has no right, but claims it anyway. Stannis has the right, but cannot inspire love. C.S. Lewis argues that authority without virtue becomes tyranny. And that's the problem, because Renly has charisma without legitimacy. Stannis has legitimacy without warmth. And then we get to Sansa. She meets, I forget the knight's name, but she meets a knight in the Godswood who promises to help get her to safety, get her back to Winterfell. And Sansa in the Godswood is one of the quietest but most powerful moments, I think, that I've come across. She, the knight tells her that only here that is the only safe place. That he tells her to come there often. They can't be seen with each other, and they can't get messages to each other, but to come there often, and when the time's right, he'll get her to safety. So only in the Godswood is the only safe place. The only safe place in a world of lies. In a world of lies, there is still a sacred space, an oath, a promise. And that's deeply reminiscent of Tolkien's sacred spaces like Lothlorien and Rivendell. They're places where truth still holds. Lewis believed that even in a fallen world, grace breaks through in small places. Sansa's story is no longer about power. It's about whether innocence can survive corruption. And then the Catelyn and Brienne chapter just really shows true feminine strength in a lot of ways. Catelyn says, I'm so tired of being strong. And it's just a greatly human line. I'm so tired of being strong. True strength is not the absence of weakness. It's the willingness to endure in love, specifically love for her family. And then Brienne is dismissed as ugly, awkward, and unfeminine, and yet she says, my life for yours. It's pure chivalry. Brienne reminds me a lot of a character like Eowyn. in The Lord of the Rings. More than any other character. In Westeros, beauty lies and power corrupts, but honor survives in unlikely places. So, by the end of these chapters, the world is still breaking. Things are shattering. Truth is contested. Power is unstable. Faith is weaponized. And love is distorted. And above it all, that comet is still burning through the sky. This section, this section answers a core theme, I think, and that's that the comet doesn't mean different things because it's unclear. It means different things because people are clear. Lewis writes, there are only two kinds of people: those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, thy will be done. In Westeros, everything is choosing truth or power, love or control, reality or illusion. And what's terrifying is the world that wins may not be the one that's true, but the one people choose to believe. And really, that's a bit like the reason that Aragorn was finally crowned king, because the people of Gondor, Faramir presented them with the choice: shall he be king? And the people answered with one voice, yea. And there's a balance that goes on. It's everything is about choice, but whether people make the right choice or the wrong choice, that is the terrifying prospect. And that's why I think someone like Cersei is the way she is. She's terrified of the choice the people will make if given the choice. So, that's through chapter 22. I'll see y'all next time. Y'all have a good day.